Support for Up First Winter Games comes from NPR sponsor Allianz Travel Insurance. Get ready to give ordinary the cold shoulder with protection for adventures that give you the best kind of chills. Learn more at allianztravelinsurance.com.
The pressure of just being at the Olympics has been something that a lot of people have been following. And Brian, you've actually spoken to some psychologists about exactly what that means for athletes in these games and what exactly they're dealing with.
Yeah, it's really come up a lot with U.S. athletes here, We've had some top contenders for gold medals like Ilya Malinin, the figure skater, Michaela Schifrin, the alpine skier, who haven't yet gotten their individual medals that they were hoping for. Some real disappointment there. And what sports psychologists talk about, there are terms for it. They call it the yips, getting the yips, or sometimes they talk about getting the twisties in gymnastics. Sometimes the term is more blunt. They say it's a question of choking, which is such an ugly term, but sometimes it happens to athletes. That all of that preparation and training coming into these games, here's what the experts tell me that they're aiming for. They're trying to get this down to where it's muscle memory, where essentially once they get into that start gate or jump into that bobsled or go out on that ice to do their performance, it's all dialed in. They're ready to go. But what can happen is that the pressure of these Olympics can crash down on them. Remember, most of these events, according to experts, after 4 years of preparation, it comes down to, on average, 10 minutes of actual final competition. Yeah. And so all of that pressure can kind of come to an edge there, and it just blows all that training out of their minds. And so the twisties, the yips, they can hit really hard. And we've really seen that. You know, when you saw Ilya Malinin down on the ice last Friday, that was a moment when it struck with tragic force.
And the thing, Brian, and just not with Olympic athletes, but also with athletes in general, when this does happen, it doesn't necessarily mean it's happening on the most difficult moves that they can attempt. Sometimes it's the routine things that they've done hundreds and hundreds of times, and they can't seem to get over that mental hurdle. Why does this, though, happen so often, it seems, in the Olympics?
Yeah, a lot of it's just the pressure and the scrutiny. You know, these are people who do perform consistently at World Cup meets, at national championships, but it's really until you come here, you don't realize the magnitude of the spotlight that comes on these athletes when they reach the Olympics. There is a microphone in front of them, a camera in front of them all the time. You know, when Michaela Schifrin skied in the giant slalom the other day, all the other skiers just skied normally. When she came up, this legendary alpine skier, they actually play this dramatic, like tension-building music. She has to stand there in the start gate while they throw this energy at her that's just saying, you're different, you're being watched more closely. And again, sometimes, you know, they have techniques. They've all practiced how to avoid the yips in those moments, but sometimes the walls crumble, they fall down. I spoke to one expert, Dr. Sahin Gupta, who studies this, researches it in Great Britain, and he says literally they can lose contact with their bodies. They can just lose the sense of themselves in space, and they lose their sense of gravity. It can be a powerful event.
Is there anything that you've heard of that they can do to maybe try and get over these make or break moments?
Increasingly, what we've seen is these athletes being very proactive on this. A lot of them are working with therapists and sports psychologists coming in. Really, if you're talking these days about a top tier contender, they almost always have in their team somebody who's working on the mind as much as the body, right? And you'll see, sometimes you'll hear them like playing really loud music. You'll see them dancing. You'll see them meditating sometimes. And these aren't just quirks. These are practiced things to get the mind to quiet down, right? Those are really important tools, and probably a lesson to all of us that there are moments when we need to kind of, you know, work through our system a little bit to calm our brain. And there's another thing that's really important here is that after the yips hit, there is also a whole kind of playbook for how to help athletes recover, how to help them kind of rebuild. This Dr. Gupta that I spoke to said the experience of going through an event like this is really like grief. They're suffering a loss event. It's very baffling in the moment that all of that work, 4 years of work, implodes in a single moment. And so there's a really important time for these athletes after they fumble, after they fall short, where they need support, they need help. And I'll say the hopeful, really cool thing on the back end of this, is that if they use those techniques, often after they do that kind of collapse, they come back stronger. You'll remember Nathan Chen, the great figure skater, absolutely fell apart in South Korea, came back in China and triumphed. Same thing for Simone Biles, the gymnast, fell apart in Tokyo, had the twisties so bad she had to withdraw from competition. 4 years later in Paris, she was the great star of the Paris Olympics. And so a lot of these people we're seeing struggle here in Milan Cortina. These are going to be the great athletes we're going to see in another 4 years.
Yeah, and Milan, to his credit, when it was over, he answered everyone's questions. He stood there and took the heat and just admitted that he blew it, admitted that he may have been too confident and handled it with a lot of poise. So, I mean, if that's the first step toward recovery after a huge disappointment, he at least is certainly on his way. NPR's Brian Mann. Brian, thanks a lot.
Thanks, A.
The Olympics are about more than medals. They're about the stories, the sacrifices, and those rare moments that bring everyone together. NPR's covering the wins, the heartbreaks, and everything in between, from first-time athletes to history makers. If you're enjoying the ride, support the coverage by hitting the blue donate button. Thanks for being part of the team.